When you go for power in tennis, does the ball hit the back fence or bury into the net? Most players never learn the key to hitting hard and staying consistent, but one of my students just did, and I'm about to show you how. In the last video, you learned why you should not copy the forehand of Jannik Sinner, or else you'll experience erratic, inconsistent tennis. The underlying reason was a huge transition in the racket face angle, requiring incredibly precise timing. Without realizing it, lots of everyday tennis players like you and me add those same complications into their swings, just like this one. Here's my recent student before we did any training together, just doing some evaluation forehands. I want you to watch and listen for the frustration here as he launches one super far, then buries one right dead in the middle of the net, then hits another one into the net before finally giving up and taking his foot off the gas and just being careful and just kind of pushing the ball in play. It was the same story over in the corner. Sometimes hitting the middle of the net, sometimes launching the ball too far, occasionally hitting great shots, but look at how tiny the margin is over the top of the net. This is not a formula for success in tennis. The reason why there's all this volatility in where the ball is going is because of all the volatility in the angle of the racket face of this player. As he takes his racket back, look at how open his strings are, meaning the racket face is angled upwards. Now, I think you know intuitively that if he were to hit the ball like this, the ball would launch way up in the air and go way too far. So at some point between his preparation and the hit, watch the angle of the strings, how he has to quickly, at the last minute, try to close the angle of the face. And he's going to continue to flip and turn the racket over. So depending on when precisely he hits the ball, between here with the face wide open and here with the face totally closed, the ball frankly could go anywhere. The camera angle from the back really shows this. Look at how open the strings are in his preparation, more than 45 degrees angled up towards the ceiling. Then by the time he hits, he's got to try to flip the racket and close the strings, which means that momentum is going to continue to carry through and then close the racket. Now his strings are facing straight down towards the court surface. So from wide open to totally closed and everything in between, his strings are transitioning all over the place. Here's a quick illustration to show you how critically important this element of the racket face angle is. You're about to see me hit two shots. One where the ball has lots of height over the net and enough curve to bring it inside the court, and the second one directly into the net. And this is the angle of the racket face for each of those two shots. On the left is the ball that went directly into the net. Look at the angle of the racket face here, slightly closed. And then on the right is the racket face angle of the shot that cleared the net safely and then curved down into the court. The racket face is slightly open. This is the difference between a ball going directly into the net and the ball clearing the net by a healthy margin. And if, by the way, the racket face ended up being like this instead, then the ball would have launched and gone way too far. There's just a couple degrees of difference in between the ball hitting the middle of the net, being just right, and launching to the back curtain, which is why we cannot, especially when accelerating aggressively, have this big transition of the racket face from open to closed, or from being super, super closed to being just barely square right at the moment of contact. By the way, you've probably heard in internet lessons over and over and over again, you want your racket face slightly closed when you hit a topspin ground stroke. Well, for me, at a 4-5 level, this is too closed. I do not swing nearly as fast. I don't have nearly the racket head speed of the players that are on TV. So for everyday players like you and me, we actually want a racket face angle that's more like this, slightly open to give us the height over the top of the net. And then if our path is correct and we curve the ball, we've got a perfect combination where we can hit aggressively but still clear the net and curve the ball and keep it in play. And the name of the game is doing that precisely over and over and over again. That's how you can hit hard and keep the ball in play without missing. So with those things in mind, here's the training I did with this student to show him how to hit the ball hard without making tons of mistakes and spraying the ball all over the place. My initial instruction to him was practice shadow swinging, starting with a closed racket face and then maintaining that racket face through the point of contact. And I told him right around the point of contact, we're going to want the racket face to be just about square, but My challenge to him was start the swing with the strings, instead of facing upwards, actually facing downwards, and then just simply maintaining a passive, relaxed hand and arm and using his body to pull the racket around towards contact. Now I can hear all the screaming out in internet land already. Ian, there's no way this player is ever going to hit topspin without changing that old grip. And I agree, a stronger grip would probably be better long-term for this player. But in this particular instance, he had a super important tournament the very next week after working together, and so that just wasn't in the cards. So I had to work with his grip, and these are his first hits, maintaining that closed racket face in the take back and then going forward to contact. And so now as he gets ready to hit, he's starting with his racket face slightly closed. Notice how, by the way, when he's actually hitting the ball, it's a little bit more open than the shadows, but he's no longer starting with the strings facing up towards the ceiling. So we no longer have that big volatility of the flip of the racket going back and forth and having to time that absolutely perfectly. Now he's starting with the racket face a little more closed than what he actually wants at contact, and then going forward to contact still with a square face, and then hitting the ball with a slightly open face, because these are very slow, relaxed swings from the service line, just underhand toss, low intensity, low racket head speed. This is actually the angle of the racket face that's going to work to put the ball over the net and in play. Drill 2 of our training was pushing him back into no man's land, starting to make things a little bit more realistic, a little bit higher intensity. I want you to watch the angle of his racket face now during his preparation and his setup, and then forward to contact. No longer is there that big flip of the racket back and forth. And at this point, I'll show you the angle from back camera in a second. He's starting to curve the ball reliably. Previously, the shots he made had no margin for error. The ball was just going directly right over the top of the net. And now with the racket face closed to start, no longer having to flip the racket over, he can confidently drop the racket lower than he was before without having to time it perfectly, and then come up to contact now with a square racket face. And so that combination of starting with the racket steady and closed and then coming forward to contact with a square racket is now starting to give him some shape and some confidence that he can accelerate and maintain consistency. Here he is now hitting full-length shots from the baseline. Again, keep your eyes on the angle of his racket face, how he's taking the racket back square or slightly closed, and then that gives him the flexibility and the freedom to drop the racket and accelerate upwards. Now things are looking much more clean and simple, no more big flipping of the racket, and this is going to open the door for him to gain trust, to gain confidence, to gain acceleration without losing control and spraying the ball into the back curtain or into the middle of the net. Here's the power of making this change. Watch this shot compared to the balls he was hitting before. How high over the net this ball goes, and it still lands well inside the court. None of his shots that traveled this high before had any chance of landing inside the court, but now he's starting to clear the net by 4 or 5 feet, have the ball land inside the baseline. It was impossible before because he didn't have the freedom to drop his racket this far below the ball before and accelerate upwards into the point of contact. And intuitively, the reason why he was not able to do that was because, remember the angle of the racket face in his preparation before? It was like 90 degrees more open than this. And so he had figured out through trial and error that he could not accelerate aggressively while maintaining precision because of that big transition of the racket face. Now his racket is starting with a closed angle, and that gives him the flexibility of dropping and then accelerating upwards. That's rolling the ball forwards and creating that margin for error. This is so satisfying to watch now. Watch these back-to-back swings. Watch the shape on the ball. Watch how he's clearing the net by plenty. He's hitting the ball confidently, and the ball is curving and dipping back into the court on the other side. This is a gigantic transition, and one that I want you to make as well in your game. If you're starting with an open face, you have to make this change. Notice you don't have to change your grip in order to see these results. And if you'd like to add topspin on top of this, make sure to click the video that's up on the screen right now. You'll see my favorite step-by-step drills to curve the ball even more confidently and aggressively so you can hit the ball even more aggressively without spraying it all over the place. Hope this is super helpful. Thanks for watching today. I'll talk to you again soon.